Chalk it up as a classic case of boomer distrust for automatics. I'll own that. I'll own that. And where does this come from? Where does this distrust that we look down on automatic transmissions, where does this come from? Well, if you're an old timer like me, it's ingrained in your childhood. Because if you go back to the 70s and the 80s, when we were out and about with first generation muscle cars, stuff from the 60s and the 70s, the difference in performance between an automatic car and a four-speed car was drastic. Full race automatics at the time had the advantage of high stall torque converters. I mean, real high stall torque converters. Back then, they used to make these converters out of Vega. They used to use Vega cores and Opal cores. They were like little 8 and 9 inch converters, and they worked really well. But for like a typical street rat, like guys like us who were just cobbling together stuff out of the junkyard, a big block and an intermediate car and some headers and a cam and an intake, right? Those things were not in the program. They were expensive. You could spend more on a torque converter than you did on the rest of your car. And I'm not exaggerating one bit. Anybody who's around back then, can verify that. So we had this basic distrust of automatics because we were limited to basically the stock factory converters. And some of them were slightly higher stall. Some, the factory high performance converters were a little bit higher stall. But they really didn't do the job. And on top of that, they limited your tinkering ability. So you get somebody like me, right? I'm a habitual tinkerer. I'm always wondering, what'll happen if I advance the cam, retard the cam, try a different this, try a different that, blah, 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 blah. Well, when you're in an automatic, when you're locked into an automatic, you're locked into the torque converter. So you can only make changes really within the range of what that converter is going to find suitable. Example, you take a cam that's going to make power at 7,000 RPM and do all kinds of awesome things, but behind a stock converter, you have nothing down low. You have to have a higher stall converter. If the cam doesn't start to make power until 3,000 or even 4,000 RPM, well, then your converter's got to be able to basically freewheel to that 3,000 or 4,000 RPM. Whereas with a clutch car, you leave wherever you want to leave. Oh, well, I put a bigger cam in a thing, so now I can't launch at 3,000, I launch at 4,000. No big deal. Times have changed, and the availability of good manual transmission stuff, manual transmission bits and knowledge and technique and everything have really gone by the wayside for the most part. Some sects of the automotive world are still hardcore manual transmission. My favorite of which are the Southeast Gassers guys. Those things are fantastic. They live the 4-speed thing, and that's the thing, or manual transmission. When you do a manual car, right? You're adopting a lifestyle. It's not. Trust me when I tell you, it's more than just, oh, my car has a stick. No, when you try to competitively race a manual transmission car, you go to a different realm. You go to a different world. You then become the clutch lifestyle, the stick lifestyle, because there's so maintenance and repair and intensive that it takes over every other aspect of the car. So, but the question is, which one is best for you? What are the drawbacks? So with my own cars, like when I set up Plan Z over here, I put a stick in it. Bottle rocket, I put a stick in it. But these were mistakes. These are mistakes. And these are mistakes based on my boomer philosophy, my boomer distrust of the slush box and the prison of the torque converter. It's the 21st century. Torque converters aren't nearly as exotic as they were back then. And automatic transmissions in and of themselves are fantastic. From the factory, they said it from the factory, they shift a little soft, they leave something to be desired, but there's no limit to the amount of tuning and beefing you can do to an automatic transmission. But I don't really want to get into that particularly. I want to talk about, for you, right? you're working on your build, you're planning your build, and you're at that, you don't know, hey, I want a 4-speed or I want a manual transmission for all of these reasons, but I should go in an automatic transmission for all of these reasons. So I want to just talk real quick about the absolute pros and cons of each, right? So with an automatic, the big con is the torque converter. Whatever you choose, now torque converters are not cheap, even though they're much more available than they were years ago. They're not cheap. And when you get into a very specific application, so in other words, it's not just like, this is my cruiser, right? And I'll throw a 3,500 RPM converter in there and it'll be fun. And you buy the things right out of the catalog, or for Jags or someone or whatever it is. And that's it. You bolt it in the car and you go cruise. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you actually want this car to work, to actually get up and work, you have to spring for a converter. And that converter's got to be exactly matched to your particular application. It's just like a camshaft. You can't just pick a converter out of the blue and expect good results. The best results or optimum results. If you're gearing towards competition, if the idea is to get to the other end first and have the car leave hard and clean consistently every time, then the converter has to be exactly matched to the application. Once you've exactly matched that application, you really can't change very much. You can make little tweaks here and there, tuning and whatnot. But let's just say you feel like just completely revamping the top end of your motor. So you're going to do heads, intake, cam, and the whole bit. You're going to do all of that stuff all at once. Well, now you take the converter that you had in there that was exactly scienced out to that application, and you sell it or you stick it on the shelf, but it's not going to work for you anymore. And now you're going to spend $1,000, $1,200, $1,500, $2,000, depending, or higher, depending on your level of severity, right? Performance severity. You're going to have to scrap your old combination and start all over again from scratch. That's the problem with automatic transmissions. Manual transmission, like I said, you just adjust your driving habit to the new reality. You do a cam intake, headers, carb, all of that stuff, and you take the car out. Now it's soft downstairs. Well, you bring up the RPM a little bit. It's no big deal. You're doing everything with the clutch pedal. The downside to the stick is breakage. It's that simple. It's breakage. Even when you've got a lot of finesse, even when you got really good parts, there's shock loading involved, like all the way through, from the transmission, the drive shaft, the yokes, the rear end, the axles. Everything is subjected to severe shock loading, and this really amplifies itself when you go to, like, let's say, a drag radial type of deal, because as a wrinkle wall slick, a bias ply tire, there is give. When you come off the clutch, there is some give there. It absorbs some of the shock. It's kind of like a cush drive on a motorcycle. Some of that shock is just absorbed by the wrinkle wall, but when you go to like a drag radial type of deal and you're stuck to the track, when you come off that clutch, it's just a hammer, right? It's a hammer blow through the drivetrain of the car. So this is where we're at with our project here with Bottle Rocket, because originally we did it with a stick. There's one other thing too. There's one other major advantage to a manual transmission over an automatic in a very high performance application. So let's just say drivability is part of the equation. You want to be able to take the car out and cruise with it, as well as go turn numbers at the track. Well, when you optimize a torque converter for that high performance use, and it's going to say, let's say, it's a 4,000, 5,000 RPM converter. It's a race converter, and the car's going to hit and hammer and go. Well, now you lose that cruising ability with the car, because it's just going to slip all the way. Anything under, let's say, 75, 80 miles an hour is just going to be slipping away, creating all kinds of heat. Heat is the enemy of automatic transmissions. So when you try to cruise a high stall converter car, you just forget about it. Your gas mileage goes out the window. Transmission life is terrible. It'll start weeping and puking tranny fluid from any place that it can after just a few miles. It is absolutely miserable. So for an ultimate street and strip type of application, you're really better off, a car that you're going to cruise. You're really better off with a manual transmission for that particular reason. I'm done with the sticks. You know, I'm done with the sticks. I learned my lesson. I made my mistakes. It was a wrong thing to do. But again, see, I'm a boomer, and I have that boomer distrust of automatic transmissions. So we're setting up Bottle Rocket now. I'll miss this. Here's the converter we're using in the car. My buddy Shane Polito, he works over at TCI. He whipped this thing up for me specifically for this car. So, and we're gonna do a video on the guts inside of a torque converter and how converters are tuned by the manufacturer to your specific application. So this one, I told him what I needed. I said, I need a converter that's going to basically essentially freewheel to around 4,000, 4,500, and then come on and kind of lock. I need super efficiency above 6,000. And that's because with this little motor that we've got here, it's not going to make any power at all down in that 2,000, 3,000 RPM range. It's going to come on hard at like 3,500, 3,800, 4,000 RPM. And then because of the cylinder heads we're using, the profile of the camshaft, it's supposed to be a torque application. And so it really hits a ceiling at about 6,000, 6,200, 6,300. So the converter has to be tuned, has to be tailored to that curve. And that's what we have over here. Is this car going to be streetable anymore? Not that it really was streetable, but will it be streetable? It'll be miserable. You don't want to deal with something like that on the street. So for a true street and strip car, I would have continued on the mission to go with the manual transmission, despite the fact that we've already grenaded a rear end, at least one second gear in transmission. I rebuilt it, I guess it was about, oh God, it's almost 2 years ago now. Yeah, we've destroyed a rear end, trans, lots of clutch issues driving through the clutch. So we had all kinds of problems actually all of the problems this car's had were centered around the manual transmission. So that's gone now, and you know, here we go. Here's the future. I'm in the future. I'll start to trust these things. And I've got the same situation with Sledgehammer, because now Sledgehammer, again, see, it's a tunnel ram 383 with a cam that doesn't really make any power underneath, let's under say 3,000, 3,500 RPM. So I've got a converter being built for this car now too. We've got the transmission all ready to go in, but it's going to be at least another week or two before I get the converter for this. So that's that. And but yeah, I got no choice, really. I've got a $4,000 match race against Andy Woods and Casper. There's been a change of date on that. We were originally supposed to race on September 3rd, but there are scheduling conflicts. I'm waiting for Andy to give me the date that he wants to get together and run this thing. I am so looking forward to squaring off against Casper. Now, I really think we got a shot. I know it's like, right, but I think we got a shot. I think we can do it. I'm trying my hardest. I got the short blocks all together now. And we're just, you know, this is ready to go in, and the trainee's ready to go in, and let's see what happens, right? We'll start testing this thing within like 2 weeks or so. So that's it, guys. You know, there's a lot to be said for a stick. I love stick. It kills me to say no, join the 21st century. That's it. I'm doing it. I'm caving to reality. But real muscle cars, you know, real 60s muscle cars, they have 3 pedals. I'll see you tomorrow.